everyone! Welcome to part 3 of our Scream and Scream Again extravaganza. And as you might have guessed, we're going to review Scream 3. We thought of going 1, 4, 2, 3. Then we thought, maybe that's not the most,
Yeah, especially since you review spoilers of previous movies and older ones, that's rough.
That's true. Yeah. It's intuitive, that's the word I was looking for. It's not the most intuitive way of doing it. Anyway, so we're reviewing Scream 3. I am Dimitri, webmaster and movie critic.
And I'm Nicolas. I do research in astrophysics.
I'm Dennis P., Bell Network support guy, and love movies.
Yes, you do. So Scream 3, directed by Wes Craven. It's actually based on a draft from Kevin Williamson, who wrote the first 2 Screams, but he was busy directing Teaching Miss Tingle and working on Wasteland at the time. So they put in Ehren Kruegers to write the screenplay.
Yeah, pretty much.
After the events of Scream 2, Sidney has gone into hiding, which is actually a nice play on the final shot of Scream 2, I found. And in the meantime, the Stab franchise, which is the adaptation of the Woodsboro murders that took place in the first 2 movies, well, Woodsboro and whatever college they're in, has turned into an official franchise, and they're at their 3rd installment, Stab 3.
Mm-hmm. Return to Roseboro, actually, yeah.
And the new Ghostface killer shows up, starts killing people on the set in order to flush out Sidney from hiding, and that's your plot for Scream 3.
Yeah. It's an acceptable plot. In the previous movies, I could more relate to what was happening because they were in high school. They were after that they were in college. There's a situation everybody has, everybody with an education, I guess, has, lived. And all of a sudden they're in Hollywood on sets of movies. That was not an area I could really, care about really. It's like, really, that's what happens on sets, whatever. I don't really care. So it's not, the plot itself I really didn't care that much for.
Yeah, that's an excellent point you make. On the one hand, I understand where they're coming from. The Scream franchise is all about kids, trying to make it into the media because that's their only means of validation. That's certainly the point of Scream 2, and certainly where the series was headed. So it makes sense for the 3rd and at the time supposed to be final movie to be in that universe. But as you point out, it's not really relatable, and it's not really what Scream is about. Because Scream 3, my biggest problem with it is that it's about Hollywood. It's full of in-jokes about Hollywood. It's full of this is how Hollywood is. This is how callous and shallow Hollywood people are. And that's not what Scream was about. It was actually about the general public, not the filmmakers. And to be honest, I'm just sick to death of Hollywood inwards, like, oh, we're Hollywood, we're going to parody ourselves. It's like, for some reason, creators in Hollywood don't seem to realize that they're the only ones interested in that, because they're the only ones living that reality. Yeah. The rest of us living, outside of America or even anywhere in any other state, just, we don't care. We don't think you're that interesting. Get over yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people might, like the workings of Hollywoods and stuff like that, but I really, okay, if you say that's how it works, whatever, I don't really care. Just give me an interesting story, which it really wasn't that good, honestly.
Yeah, well, as I pointed out, there's a major plot hole in it, is that the killer's trying to flush out Sidney by killing people on the set of Stab 3. Sidney's not involved with the Stab franchise, so I'm not entirely sure why she would give a flying poop.
Yeah. And, all of a sudden, we need to contact Sidney. Maybe she has information about these things. Why would she have information about what's happening? She's in hiding. She's isolated. Nobody knows where she is except for a few people. And we need to contact her. She might have something to do with it. It's like, why? Really?
And this is why Kevin Williamson maybe is missed.
But I will say, one of the things I do like about the movie, though, is that it does a good job of respecting the characters. Because it is a new writer coming in, and the danger with a new writer coming in, especially in a franchise that's moderately tired at that point, is that sometimes the characters just end up being reshaped into something else entirely and really disrespected. Here, I find Ehren Kruegers did a really terrific job of maintaining the characters as who they are. Sidney really still feels like Sidney. She's wounded, but she's still a strong person. The same thing with Dewey. They maintain the idea that he looks like a dumbass.
Yeah.
And he behaves like a dumbass for the most part, but there is something really sweet and intelligent about him that still makes him likable. And, Gail Weathers is still, an insufferable bitch.
Yeah. And that is actually a problem I have with the movie. Mild spoiler. The first hour, it's mostly about Gail and Dewey. and not really that interested in those characters, really, because like you said, she's an insufferable bitch, and he's kind of, the humor of the movie. Like, he's kind of more of a support character, really. The first two movies were about Sydney, and she's, maybe in the first hour, she's in the movie for like a grand total of 5 minutes. And that's not what I was looking for, in the Scream franchise. The movies are about Sydney. You should have Sydney in there a lot more in the first hour.
No, I agree. It's also because they keep backtracking the Dewey Gale Weathers relationship, which I think is a mistake. Like, they did the same thing in the second Scream movie, where by the end of the first movie, they're supposed to sort of hook up.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of the second movie, you learn that they did. So they hook up again. And that's exactly when we mentioned 2 weeks ago with the Scream 2 review that there's a slowdown in the movie. The slowdown occurs exactly when they start re-exploring that part of the relationship, the Gale Weathers-Dewey relationship. It's where you're like, I've seen it in the previous movie, I don't care. And then the third movie, they split them up again so they can get back together a third time. And it's sort of like, okay, now I've seen it twice already and I really don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And that was pretty much the first hour of the movie. And nothing really moves forward except, for their relationship. A few people get killed, but, that's about it. It really picks up in the second hour, but at that point, it feels kind of too late for me.
Another problem that I have with it, this one is all about the trilogy. The horror trilogy. These are the rules of the horror trilogy.
What kind of horror trilogies is there? Like, if we think about it.
Back in 99, I think it's
2000.
2000. I thought it was 99. Oh, 2000. Okay. There was really no such thing as a horror trilogy, unfortunately. At least not anything that's recognizable. You could, I suppose, argue that Exorcist was one of the horror trilogies at the time, but most other horror trilogies are just one horror movie with two sequels.
Yeah.
So when they pop out their rules, it doesn't mean anything. They have this scene where one character from the past, I suppose I shouldn't reveal who because it is one of the few delights in the movie where that happens.
Yeah.
It shows up and tells you the three rules of the trilogy, and I was listening to that. I was like, give me an example. It's like, and they only named two movie trilogies in that speech, and it's Godfather and Star Wars, neither of which are horror movies, obviously. Yeah. And
the rules don't even apply to those movies. That they give the examples. He has those rules, and you think about those movies, like those don't apply at all.
The first one is the past is going to bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
There's going to be some retcon. There's going to be. It goes back to the beginning. They were preparing the retcon basically. They're saying, look, we're going to tell you stuff that you thought were real originally, but they're not, and they're gonna come back. It's gonna come back to haunt you. Like if you take a trilogy like Star Wars, right, where when you see a Return of the Jedi.
Spoiler alert: Darth Vader reverts back to Anakin, and it's sort of like that's the past saves your ass.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well I don't know if that's what they took.
Then the second rule is the killer is nearly indestructible. It's like that's a rule from the second movie. You're just recycling the same rule.
That's a good point.
And the final rule is...
all bets are off.
Which... What?
Yeah.
That's not a rule?
That doesn't mean anything. And, what do they mean? Like, for example, if you refer to Star Wars, all bets are off, what does that mean exactly? What happened that was, like, really shocking in that, that was unexpected in that movie, really, that all bets are off? If Luke had died, oh well, that would have been shocking. All bets are off, but it pretty much ended as expected.
Leia too. I wish they had killed Leia. I really do. It would have been great, like a funeral with Luke and Han going like, I barely knew my sister. I only learned now that she's my sister, but she was a great kisser. Yeah, back to Scream. Yeah, it's for me the problem with it is that it's a line written for the trailers. The three rules of the trilogy, all bets are off at the end, and then they can do a montage of people like going and screaming and gasping, and it's like that's great for the trailer. I'm sure I was super psyched when I saw the trailer, but when you watch the movie, you're like, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's going to be our reviews now, just like a bunch of interjections and like onomatopoeia.
Huh?
Again, I think you kind of see the the quality dip, you know? I don't know. Is that because of the bad writing? You know, is this where Kevin Williamson is missed? I think
blame
so.
the writing. I blame the writing. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still not a fan of Ehren Kruegers' writing. He has gotten better, but it's still really problematic for me. But this is certainly one of his worst scripts, maybe rivaled with, Halloween H2O, you know?
Oh God, if he wrote that, then
Yeah, he did.
Okay, now I know why I don't like that movie at all. By the way, the same house was used in Halloween H2O, so
Oh, it's that house. Oh.
yeah. Okay, that explains a lot. Wow. Okay, he has a thing for that place.
All right. Let's get into the acting then.
Okay.
Go for it.
The thing with the acting is that they're all actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I have to say. Craven Knight, I think, really did a great job throughout the entire Scream series, casting the series, even when the story might not have been so great in this one. My favorite actress in the bunch, though, absolutely has to be Parker Posey.
Yes.
As this completely psychotic woman who wants to out-Gale Gale.
Yeah. Well, she's always great in any role she plays, so, I mean...
3/4 of her lines are actually ad-libbed.
Yeah, okay, I could see that.
You really can, because she's in a completely different movie. And my favorite bit of hers is and that's freaking genius, is at one point there's a house that blows up, and she's rolling down the hill after the explosion, and the best part about it is she's trying to have a conversation while rolling down the hill.
Can't stop falling.
She was very entertaining. I must say she was one of the better characters in the movie.
Yeah.
Funny enough, too, they put in Jay and Silent Bob just for almost no reason.
They just went hey, come over here. We'll film a shot with you. It'll be funny.
I like it because I'm a Jay and Silent Bob fan. But yeah, it was just fun.
Oh, and of course, Liev Schreiber's in it for just a very few instances. He plays Cotton Weary.
Oh, yeah.
Do I reveal that he's the first victim? It's kind of obvious, but...
Technically the first victim is his wife, but,
Girlfriend,
yeah. Hey, that's another plot hole.
What?
I mean, the killer's killing people in order of the movie, and yet Cotton's girlfriend died first, and she's not in the movie.
Yeah, you're right. Whatever. None of this screenplay really works. That's my big... Again, I'm going back to the story, but, the structure of the story is my biggest problem with Scream. Ehren Kruger and I do not have the best relationship, by which I mean he doesn't know me and doesn't care what I think, but I don't like his movies. And the problem that I have with Ehren Kruger is twofold. First of all, at that time, he was actually a screenwriter that had done thrillers, action thrillers. And he's being shoehorned into a screenplay that's supposed to play on the cliches of horror movies. And that's not his background. And that's not his fault, you know what I mean? He's a miscast writer. But it leads to a really problematic third installment of the Scream franchise where suddenly you have action set pieces. The first set piece involves Cotton Weary rolling through traffic to save his girlfriend from the Ghostface killer and rushing and running through traffic because the car is jammed and everything is those are action tropes, not horror tropes.
Yeah, that's true.
And then eventually a house blows up and again, action trope, not horror trope.
Yeah. I did not think about that.
You know what? Sorry to interrupt you, but they also bothered me, those set pieces. Me too. I'm what am I watching? It's this, for me, the killer resorting to explosions, really? It's not the same. Like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head is that he tried too hard with his previous background and he didn't maybe respect the horror genre, or he tried to mix it and it just didn't work for me.
It's like when the house explodes.
Mm-hmm.
It happens because of a gas explosion, because the murderer is texting them, and there's only going to be one person that's going to be spared, and they're all afraid, but there's no power in the house, so they all run out. And then the fax keep coming because apparently fax machines don't work on electricity.
That's so true.
And one guy says, "I need to know who's going to survive." He's running back in, and he grabs a piece of paper. And, he can't read it, so, he goes in the kitchen, and he grabs a lighter, and he puts the lighter on, and then the house explodes. But that's, a lot of faith from the killer's part that, the guy's going to run in back, get the paper, not run out with the paper and read it on the outside where there's light, but, no, try and find a light source in the house, and not find a flashlight or anything, but a lighter. and that's going to make the gas explode. You're like, really? That's a huge stretch right there.
It's the fact that he doesn't grab a flashlight that bugs me, because every house has a flashlight. Now, if your house doesn't have a flashlight, get one. It's sort of like a fire extinguisher. You should have one. If your house doesn't have a fire extinguisher, get one, because every house should have that. It's sort of like having a condom in your wallet. If you don't have a condom in your wallet...
It's the other thing I kind of found weird. Maybe you won't agree with me on this, but I kind of found it weird that the killer had a voice changer that had everybody's voice, and he could play around with that.
I know, that's ridiculous. If I had one of those machines, I'd have so much fun, but those don't exist, really.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing you can get away with in an action movie again. It's like you think of John Woo's Face Off. It's like where they take people's face and replace them, and then they go to jail with magnetic boots. It's completely insane, but you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
This is an action movie. But you do that in a horror movie, and that's where people disconnect, because for a movie to be scary, I have to believe in that reality to a certain degree. And when you throw stuff like that in, that's when people go like, wow, dumb.
Yeah, because the thing is, like you said, if somebody grabs a voice changer and they call you, you're going to freak out. You don't know who the voice is. You can't star 6 and 9 them. You can't do anything. You feel helpless. But you pretty much know that nobody could, like you said, imitate other people's voices to make you believe that, there's somebody else to trick you. I don't know. For me, it was too far-fetched, even for Scream.
Now, the second problem I have with Ehren Kruegers actually is his fault. He has trouble pacing his story. He does a great scene. Like, the dialogue is natural, and it's witty. This is not one of those screenplays like, the Twilight movies where you're like, say what? No, he writes dialogue like normal people talk, or at least,
the characters, talk.
He knows how to write a scene. Unfortunately, he doesn't know how to place the scene into a coherent narrative. There's one key set piece, and it's a really, really gloriously imaginative set piece, and Wes Craven does a lot with that scene where Sydney tries to escape the Ghostface killer in a set of Woodsboro that looks exactly like her bedroom in the first movie.
Oh, yeah. Right down to the T. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's brilliant because she keeps taking doors where she thinks it'll lead her to where it would lead her if it was her real house, and it leads to a dead end every time, and it sort of becomes very labyrinthine. It's a really terrific, suspenseful scene, and Wes Craven cuts it really just perfectly. Well, with his editor, Patrick Lucier there. His editor is just a terrific editor. He started directing, and I sort of miss him as an editor because his work is really good. But the thing of it is, that's a scene that belongs at the climax. I would have loved that to be the final scene of the movie, the final showdown of the movie, being like you bring it back to the beginning, like you said your rules would do, in a literal way, where she goes back to her house, except it's not really her house because Scream is all about the movie within the movie, so she's in the house within the movie,
Yeah.
And it would have been so imaginative, so clever, but no, it happens in the middle of the movie, and you're all jazzed up, and instead of escalating the stakes, then you have this next scene where, the final scene where it takes place as a generic motel where people are running around with absolutely nothing special going on in it.
Yeah, it's not a motel, it's like a mansion, but...
Yeah, sorry, a manor, yeah.
Manners, but for me, like you said, to go back on the point there, you know what, for me, I think the movie would have been awesome had it ended Killer versus Sydney in her makeshift house in that little town that Hollywood made. I think that would have been amazing, and you didn't need to have all the side characters there, like just cat and mouse in that environment would have been perfect.
Another thing, the pacing was also kind of off because you have throughout the whole movie, you have I think 3 people killed, and then in the final house there, the final scene thing, it's like. You have, it's a bloodbath, 300 people get killed. It's like there's more people killed in that final scene in the house there, or about as much as there is in, the whole movie beforehand. So that was, not quite what happened in the previous Scream movies where the killing was at least constant throughout the whole thing, I feel. So that was also kind of off, and it's really, really slow. And then at the end, it feels more, I guess, like an action movie where everything climaxes at the end and you have a bunch of killings. But those killings don't resonate really because, you kill one person after the other. You're like, okay, well, he's dead. Oh, now he's dead. Oh, now he's dead. And, it gets kind of boring.
For me, that's another reason why I didn't like it. There was... his birthday party was like 5 people, in the room, like in the manor. It was just really retarded, like
But
it's just wasn't really well done.
it doesn't help that he never takes the time to actually introduce us to the new characters. These actors are all Hollywood caricatures. They're all baneful because Hollywood loves to make fun of itself in the angle of like, we're all really hateful people and I hate my neighbors kind of deal.
Yeah.
But I don't care when they die as a result, Like when the first actress, like the first established actress dies, you're like, good. So what did that freaking achieve?
Well, that's the thing. After these 2 killings, they realized that they were killing, the cast in order of the movie. And that also I kind of rolled my eyes. After 2 killings, that should just have been random completely. They're killing them in order. Like, really? After just 2 deaths, you deduce that like that?
Oh.
That's weak. And what really did that accomplish? Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's the astronomer in me talking like only 2 and you have a pattern there. It's like, no.
Yeah, well, that's screenwriting 101.
Yeah.
The patterns are established by 3. In mathematics, patterns are established by a lot more than 3.
Yeah.
But in storytelling, patterns are established by 3. The first one is the killing. The second one is like, oh, it happened again. The third one is like, oh, okay, there must be a motivation between those. That's how your mind works. Like, if you look at children's story, Dorothy comes to the house, she eats a bowl of porridge.
Yeah.
Everything goes by 3, and that's because 3 establishes a pattern in our minds. Also, your movie is called Scream 3 and it's about a trilogy, so, that might have happened as well. That's a good place to start the ratings.
I'm going to give it a B-. You should watch Scream 1 and Scream 2. Don't really bother with Scream 3. If you want to, have a base for Scream 4 that's coming up, that's fine. You might not be as bored as I am, but I really didn't enjoy that movie that much.
I'm hesitating between 2 grades, to be honest. I'm going to give it a C. I was tempted to give it a C-. My grade would have been between C- and C. It's somewhere between problematic and just bland. But ultimately, I think the character work is strong enough that I do want to give Ehren Kruegers props because he was a relatively young screenwriter at the time, for actually taking a very particular voice. Kevin Williamson's voice is very particular, and actually carrying it through in a way that feels consistent with the universe of Scream. It's just that he didn't really manage to provide an interesting or even sensible story for it. But at the end of the day, the worst thing that Scream 3 ever does is bore me. It doesn't actually, ruin anything in terms of the universe that was created before. And we're going to get a Scream 4, and most people are excited about it. That's because he didn't do that terrible a job, no matter how much I've been whining in this review.
Oof. I don't know. I'm torn, Do I give it a B- or a C? I don't know. It really disappointed me. I wanted first of all more deaths. I wanted more.
Really, I thought there were too many. That's an interesting. You wanted more deaths?
You know what? They had, I think, the same amount of kills as the second one. And they used the least amount of blood in this one. Just to tell you, it disappointed me in a lot of aspects. But for me, what pissed me off is that even the detectives, like, you know what? In a trilogy, all bets are off. They made it sound like, you know what? This is the third one. Anything could go. Anything could happen. Watch out. The main character could die. With the rules and what they were saying, they kind of build it up for me too much. So it disappointed me because, you know what? All bets were not off. I had a bigger shock in the second movie when Randy died than in this one. This one, they didn't kill Dewey. They didn't kill Gail. They didn't kill Sidney. They didn't kill anybody except Cottonweary. They didn't kill any big names. So for me, it's like, you're not doing what you promised, what you delivered in the movie. So, I don't know. Do I give it a C for that? I think I'll give it a C.
Okay, let's get into spoilers now.
Spoilers.
Yay! So stop listening now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, well, you're on your own, buddy. You should have pressed the button, because Scott Foley is the killer.
Yeah. They break the tradition now. It's not 2 killers, it's just 1. That didn't bother me that much.
No, that's fine.
But they chose a character that, again, was the blandest, had nothing really to add to the story at all. They tried to make it look like it was McDreamy. What's his name?
Patrick Dempsey. He gets better with age. Like a fine wine.
Patrick Dempsey. might have been a suspect at one point because he gets really close to Sydney, and he was one of the only characters that could have called her because he got the number from Dewey's phone. And they just completely no, okay, it's not him,
It's actually impossible that it'd be Patrick Dempsey.
Why?
Well, okay, when he finds the phone there,
yeah,
it's like, oh, it's Patrick Dempsey. It's like, but Patrick Dempsey's not anywhere near the house. He's at the police station.
Yeah, I guess. So that's pretty nice because they try and make you think that it's him, but it's impossible that it's him. So that's pretty bad writing right there. And really, the other characters had no reason whatsoever. So I guess if the movie had made me actually care enough to think about it, the killer's pretty obvious, really. Yeah.
Well, in fairness, Scott Fleet doesn't really have a motivation either.
Yeah, that's true.
He only retroactively has one once they reveal what his deal was, but beforehand, you weren't privy to this information.
That's a good point. So yeah, you're right. I correct what I said. You have no reason to think anybody is the killer in this movie. You're really watching it half expecting that it's somebody that wasn't even shown in the movie at all at the beginning, and I'm like, who are you?
It's the Green Goblin.
The other thing I didn't like too much is that because he played with that, you see, and it goes again into this, is that the main killer, who's the director, he kills one of the characters by calling her into his office, but obviously denying that it was him, but obviously he was using his real voice to talk to her, and they're reading parts of the script. And then, then he switches the voice to the Ghostface killer. Because what I'm saying is that the killer was kind of pointing at himself open. I mean, the cops did take him in, and it's like, why would you do that? I mean, oh no, it wasn't my voice. Dude, you have a voice changer. You could have done it any other way. Why bring her into your office? Is it written in that way so we don't think it's you? Like as the audience? You know what? That's the problem with the movie is that the one thing that really bothered me is that one of the rules is anyone, including the main character, can die. And for me, they let me down with that because the only big character that got killed was Cotton Weary. Gail and Dewey at one point, they get caught by the killer, and he uses them as bait to get to Sydney, to bring her into, into the manor, but he lets them live,
Yeah.
So there's no, I don't want to say there's no real suspense in that aspect. It's like, anything goes, but nothing really does go.
Yeah, no, I agree. The motivation is a little bit of a problem, too. I am not a big fan of retcon storytelling. And, of course, one of their big rules for the Scream trilogy is the past is going to bite you in the ass. So they shoehorn this origin story where he was the real mastermind behind the killings with Skeet Ulrich and with Billy and Stu in the first movie. And you're like, really? That's so convoluted. It's so complicated. It sort of tarnishes a little bit the story of the first one because of it. It's way funnier if it's just two random kids being complete idiots.
That's true. But then him wanting to kill Sydney because he wants the life that Sydney has, and he's taking it from her. That's weak. Okay, you kill, Sydney's mother. She rejected him when he came to her. Mm-hmm. He says, "No, you're not my kid. That's not my life anymore." Okay, I can understand him wanting to kill her, but then wanting to kill Sydney. Not that I condone murder in any shape or form, just saying, but in the movie universe, I can understand him wanting to kill her.
You understand a psychopath feeling that way.
Yeah.
Because, even objectively, Maureen Prescott has every right to want not to really hang on to that memory if she's been abused that way.
Yeah, but it's a kid,
But that's exactly it. His suffering is also real.
Yeah.
It's a situation in real life where it would be really complicated and hard, so I buy into that part.
Yeah, but him wanting to kill Sydney for that, you're like, no, I didn't buy that at all.
Oddly enough, that's the part that I actually like, because the other part felt a little bit too real for me, and sort of like if you're doing horror comedy, that's what Scream is, it felt a little bit uncomfortable. It's sort of like, hey, if you want to make people laugh, here's a tip: don't mention the Holocaust and don't mention rape. But the other part of the motivation where you say where he just wants to kill Sydney because of that, you're like, what? That's the part that works for me because it's crazy. It's completely insane the same way that Timothy Olyphant in the second Scream movie was completely insane, his motivation, and Stu was crazy in the first motivation because the whole idea is that he's a little bit like Cotton Weary, where he validates himself according to media attention and fame. Sidney is at the center of all this media attention, and he feels like, well, how come you get a life and I don't? And it's just like, it's stupid, it's insane, but that's sort of what makes it funny.
Yeah, but in a way, I don't know, it makes it stupid and funny, but he has all this well-thought-out plan. I'm the one that came up with the plan, in the first movie, and, so he's a very smart, thought-out person, and, I found my mother, and she's, he had all this plan in his head, and, very smart person. All of a sudden, he's all crazy. I'm going to kill you too, because, I want your life. He went from like a really, really smart plan to like a really dumb reason in like less than 10 seconds.
That's because nobody was famous at that point. Neither Maureen nor Sidney nor him are famous at that point with when he corrupted billions too, right? But after the events of that, Sidney became famous. And it's like, not only does she get the mother, but she gets to have a real life, because the only way to have a real life is to have a life in front of the media. And I was like, I don't have a parent and I don't have a life. She gets a real life because of my actions. And that's when he completely loses his freaking mind.
I guess. But if you have to explain it to me, then it's not good.
Definitely.
And then like, the bulletproof vest and everything, you're like, okay, surprise, I have a bulletproof vest, surprise, I also have a bulletproof vest. You're like, oh, come on.
Look, you're doing a slasher, not a bang-banger. Yeah. I was going to say banger, and it's like, ooh, no. That's Maureen Prescott's movie, but...
Oh.
On that note, if you have any questions, comments you want to share with us, write us at mail@idiomanic.com or post a comment at idiomanic.com. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. And we will see you next time. Oh, you should have a condom in your wallet too if you're a girl. No, if you're a lesbian, obviously forget about it. But otherwise, condom in your wallet, not a bad idea.
It gets expensive with the expiration dates, though, especially if you don't use them.
You sure you want me to keep that in the recording?
No, you can cut that.
And certainly where the series was headed. So it makes sense for the third and at the time supposed to be final movie to be in that universe. But as you point out, it's not really relatable, and it's not really what Scream is about. Because Scream 3, my biggest problem with it is that it's about Hollywood. It's full of in-jokes about Hollywood. It's full of this is how Hollywood is. This is how callous and shallow Hollywood people are. And that's not what Scream was about. It was actually about the general public, not the filmmakers. And to be honest, I'm just sick to death of Hollywood inwards. Like, oh, we're Hollywood, we're going to parody ourselves. It's like, for some reason, creators in Hollywood don't seem to realize that they're the only ones interested in that, because they're the only ones living that reality. Yeah. The rest of us living, outside of America or even anywhere in any other state, just we don't care. We don't think you're that interesting. Get over yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people might, like the inner of Hollywoods and stuff like that, but I really, okay, if you say that's how it works, whatever, I don't really care. Just give me an interesting story, which it really wasn't that good, honestly.
Yeah, well, as I pointed out, there's a major plot hole in it. It's Scream 2, I found. And in the meantime, the Stab franchise, which is the adaptation of the Woodsboro murders that took place in the first two movies, well, Woodsboro and whatever college they're in.
Yeah.
Has turned into an official franchise, and they're at their third installment.
Stab 3.
Mm-hmm. Return to Roseboro, actually, yeah.
And the new Ghostface killer shows up, starts killing people on the set in order to flush out Sidney from hiding. And that's your plot for Scream 3.
Yeah. It's an acceptable plot. In the previous movies, I could more relate to what was happening because they were in high school. They were after that they were in college. There's a situation everybody has, everybody with an education, I guess, has, lived. And all of a sudden they were in Hollywood on sets of movies. That was not an area I could really, care about really. It's like, really, that's what happens on sets, whatever. I don't really care. So it's not, the plot itself I really didn't care that much for.
Yeah, that's an excellent point you make. On the one hand, I understand where they're coming from. The Scream franchise is all about kids, trying to make it into the media because that's their only means of validation. That's certainly the point of Scream 2. Hey everyone, welcome welcome to part 3 of our Scream and Scream Again extravaganza. And as you might have guessed, we're going to review Scream 3. We thought of going 1, 4, 2, 3. Then we thought, maybe that's not the most,
Yeah, especially since you review spoilers of previous movies and older ones. That's rough.
That's true. Yeah. It's intuitive. That's the word I was looking for. It's not the most intuitive way of doing it. Anyway, so we're reviewing Scream 3. I am Dimitri, webmaster and movie critic.
And I'm Nicolas. I do research in astrophysics.
I'm Dennis P. Bell Network support guy and love movies.
Yes, you do. So Scream 3, directed by Wes Craven. It's actually based on a draft from Kevin Williamson, who wrote the first 2 Screams, but he was busy directing Teaching Miss Tingle and working on Wasteland at the time. So they put in Ehren Kruegers to write the screenplay.
Yeah, pretty much.
After the events of Scream 2, Sidney has gone into hiding, which is actually a nice play on the final shot about him that still makes him likable. And, Gail Weathers is still, an insufferable bitch.
Yeah. And that is actually a problem I have with the movie. Mild spoiler, the first hour, it's mostly about Gail and Dewey. And I'm not really that interested in those characters, really, because like you said, she's an insufferable bitch, and he's kind of, the humor of the movie. Like, he's kind of more of a support character, really. The first 2 movies are about Sydney, and she's, maybe in the first hour, she's in the movie for like a grand total of 5 minutes. And that's not what I was looking for, in the Scream franchise. The movies are about Sydney. You should have Sydney in there a lot more in the first hour.
No, I agree. It's also because they keep backtracking the Dewey Gail Weathers relationship, which I think is a mistake. Like, they did the same thing in the second Scream movie, where by the end of the first movie, they're supposed to sort of hook up.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of the second movie, you learn that they did. So they hook up again. And that's exactly when we mentioned 2 weeks ago with the Scream 2 review that there's a slowdown in the movie. The slowdown occurs exactly when they start re-exploring that part of the relationship. The Gail Weathers-Dewey relationship is where you're like, is that the killer's trying to flush out Sidney by killing people on the set of Stab 3. Sidney's not involved with the Stab franchise, so I'm not entirely sure why she would give a flying poop.
Yeah. And, all of a sudden, we need to contact Sydney. Maybe she has information about these things. Why would she have information about what's happening? She's in hiding. She's isolated. Nobody knows where she is except for a few people. And we need to contact her. She might have something to do with it. So, why? Really?
And this is why Kevin Williamson maybe is missed.
But I will say, one of the things I do like about the movie, though, is that it does a good job of respecting the characters. Because it is a new writer coming in, and the danger with a new writer coming in, especially in a franchise that's moderately tired at that point, is that sometimes the characters just end up being reshaped into something else entirely and really disrespected. Here, I find Ehren Kruegers did a really terrific job of maintaining the characters as who they are. Sydney really still feels like Sydney. She's wounded, but she's still a strong person. The same thing with Dewey. They maintain the idea that he looks like a dumbass.
Yeah.
And he behaves like a dumbass for the most part, but there is something really sweet and intelligent